Hello and welcome to Cover Story. Today we're in conversation with Dr. Anjali Malpani. She's an IVF specialist and she's also the founder of the Malpani Infertility Clinic. She's out with a book on infertility called Tears, Tears, Sighs and Lullabies, The Untold Story of Infertility. The reason why Dr. Anjali wrote this book is she's saying that the world population, in fact, about nearly 17 to 18% of the world population is infertile. These issues are not talked about but treated as stigmas. Often the women are treated as someone whose role is to bear children, and when they can't, then they are what discarded by society or the family, and people even, in fact, sometimes marriages are annulled, people look for new marriages. So there is a solution to all this. And what about the male problem? It's a male sperm count is linked to the man's mardangani. The man is not a complete man if he's infertile. So these are the taboos and issues that she deals with. And to her record, she's delivered about 15,000 babies. So with her treatment, so I welcome you to this conversation, Dr. Anjali, and good to have you on the show today.
Hi, Priya. Nice to be here too. I'm really looking forward to this chat.
No, in fact, I must tell our viewers that you and your husband, Dr. Anirudh Malpani, were also consultants on that movie, Vicky Donor, that made all of us, aware of these issues, problems that people face, and not just the problems, but there are solutions at hand. So that's what we want to talk to you about, solutions. And in fact, in your book, you've mentioned a lot of very interesting case studies, homosexual couples, women who've tried 17 to 18 times before they can have a child, people with zero sperm count. How do you deal with it? Can you tell us about one or two of the stories that you've written in your book? And then I'm going to ask you about the mindset and the work that you do.
Okay, so one of my favorite stories is the very first one. It's called Tea and Coffee. Now, from the title, you don't know what it is about. So people keep on guessing it. But it's interesting. I like this story because it covers a lot of angles. It covers the male patriarchal society that India is, how we are dominated by the males, where a woman cannot decide what beverage she has, whether she wants tea or coffee. It's always, when I ask the couple when they come into the clinic, would you like tea or coffee? And the husband answers two coffees. And the woman, on her own just picks up the coffee and has it. And as the story progresses, she keeps on drinking coffee all the time. But then there is a point where she actually comes after, during the treatment, and I go through her history, personal history, and she comes up and says, I've never had coffee in my life. It's always been tea. And I said, why are you having coffee? She says, oh, this is what my mother told me. When you get married, you've got to adjust to the family. So I brought this out along with our pioneering work, where if now a man with zero sperm count can father his own baby. This treatment is called TISA-ICSI, testicular extraction of sperms, along with intracytoplasmic sperm injection. It's a big name, but it is just one of a type of an IVF, you can say, or assisted reproductive technique, where a man, even with a zero count now today, can be a father. So I brought out the pioneering work along with this angle, and I've also shown that how after she gets a baby, she asks for tea. So all through, because you're infertile, your self-confidence goes down, your self-esteem goes down, people look down upon you, so women are not treated well. But once you get that baby, suddenly you get a confidence. So I brought out how childbearing is so important in our patriarchal society. A woman is not looked upon for what she is or what she achieves, but according to her childbearing status. So I want to bring this out in my stories, how important it is.
That's what I like, because you're not just dealing with a medical issue, you're also dealing with a social issue, and also as you said, a patriarchal society. So, Anjali, what I like about the book is, it's not just a book about a medical situation, but also it talks a lot about the social, it's a commentary on the social conditions and the patriarchal system that exists in society today. I like that bit, how you use the tea and coffee to, make another larger point. And often women who can't have kids are treated as lesser than equals, rather than, once they do have a child, they can assert their independence and, even try to assert themselves again within the family system. You also talk about homosexual couples, gay couples, lesbians who, now there is a way out for them to become a complete family. There's a story in your book about a couple from Bhopal. Can you tell us a bit about that story?
This was a couple which came back way back in 2016, a couple from Bhopal, midtown cities. You don't really expect them to, want to, to be open about it. So initially when I saw them, he came as a single man, didn't tell me about his partner. But later on, as he kept on coming for consulting, he told me he had a partner and how they had a tough time telling their parents, opening up, telling that, okay, this is what I want to do in life. The mother obviously threw a fit and said, this is not done. How is she going to face society? So they were partners. They met in college. They always knew there was something wrong with them, but didn't know about it because in India, we don't talk about, homosexuality, gay couples. It's just a no-no. And people, when they grow up as teenagers, they have preferences, but they don't know what's happening to them. So I brought all this in the story. And then it is a really sad story because, just then the Supreme Court decriminalized the homosexuality. So they were on a high and they said, wow, this is fantastic. This is the future. So they come to me and they say, okay, great, we'll get married because they were living in by then. And then they wanted a baby. They wanted to complete their family. But just as they came to me, the decriminalization occurred and they were celebrating. But as we had to, because gay couples, obviously they're two men. So we need a surrogate to, birth their child. So typically one acts like the husband, the other is the wife. So the one who gives the sperms is the father, and we get an egg donor and we do surrogacy, and then they take over the child. But just then it was their bad luck that the Supreme Court said that, marriages in gay couples is not allowed and, same-sex couples is not allowed. And that dampened them. At the same time, in 2021, the ART bill came in. Now, this is another very regressive bill, I would say, for a country like India.
Is the ART bill?
The ART is the Assisted Reproductive Technology Bill, which has just come in January 21. Well, we have been trying to do the bill and it was controlled by ICMR. So we had regulations for almost 10 years, 12 years, but it wasn't a law. But now on January 25th, 2021, it's become a law and it says that same-sex couples cannot have a baby in India. To have a baby, you need to be married, which is really, really a big letdown for these couples. And I would say, it really needs a change. So we are all campaigning to have these changes, but I don't think anything's going to happen yet. So that's really regressive, I feel, when we were really progressive all these years. So that's sad. So now the couple, obviously, they can't have a baby. They can't get married. So they're yet probably living in. I've lost touch with them now because this was a few years ago. And it's really sad.
And but outside India, same-sex couples are allowed. What is the law outside India?
Yes. Especially places like USA. Different countries have different rules, but there are places where USA, yes, you are allowed. Certain states allow them. Certain states allow them to have a baby. They allowed to get married. Yes.
The other cases that you've helped, you talked about a woman without a womb or another woman who tried 17 times and she was lucky on the 18th. So there's a lot of emotional counseling also you must be doing in this work.
Absolutely. In fact, a major part of my treatment is counseling, because infertility is not just a medical problem. It's very much an emotional, psychological, and very much a social one. So this is an emotional roller coaster that they go through. There's a lot of suffering, grief, of course, there's depression, there's sadness, but there are other feelings that they go through. Now, typically, if I describe these feelings, they fall into, let's say, sadness, anger. They're angry at themselves, they're angry at the parents, they're angry with with their partners very often. So there's a lot of marital problem. They're fighting almost to a point of divorce. They're fighting with their in-laws, they're fighting with their parents. There's also a lot of blame game. They blame themselves for the silliest thing, oh, I ate this, so I'm not infertile. Oh, when I was small, especially the men, if they have a low sperm count, it's very, very common to blame themselves. The commonest thing is, oh, I masturbated a lot when I was a teenager, and now my sperm count has gone down. This is a very, very common myth in men when they have a low sperm count or a low motility. So they're always blaming themselves, and they're blaming their partners, they're blaming their family members, they're blaming their bosses. So there's a lot of problems. They also go through guilt. they feel guilty for doing, not being pregnant, not making their in-laws happy, or maybe their parents happy, because parents are always after them. Oh, I want to be a grandmom, I want a grandchild. The societal pressures are so much. So it's a lot of emotions. It's called an emotional roller coaster that they go through. And I think a very important part of my clinic and my treatments is not so much medical, because it's like driving a car. Okay, you're doing IVF. What's so big about it? But I feel these, when you address these emotions, they're at peace with themselves. So in fact, I started India's first support group called Infertility Friends way back in 1997, where we tell the patients that you're not alone. Every infertile couple feels, oh, my younger sister got pregnant. Oh, my friends are pregnant. But even the beggars on the road have babies. So we need to tell them you're not alone. That the world, in fact, it's quite shocking to know that the incidence is 17.5%. WHO has just come out with a recent report in April, which says that 1 in 6 couples in the world are infertile, which means 17.5% are infertile. And if you see the India's population, about 28 million are infertile, in the world 48 million. So not alone, there are lots of people sailing the same boat, and you don't need to feel you're the only one. So we actively teach them how to deal with their families, how to deal at places at work. They talk to each other and they get the support that they need. So I think it's very important. Counseling is a very important part of my treatment.
Fair enough, and I totally, get that. But in terms of, male infertility, let's first talk about that. What makes the sperm count low? Is it because of stress, or is it just genetic? Are there outside factors that attribute to a low sperm
Yes.
count?
So sperm count, there are two things that we see in a semen. One is the count, and the other is the motility. A normal count by WHO standards, again, is 15 million per ml. So anybody, it's not a magic number 15, it could be 14, 15. And it's important to know that the sperm counts change every 6 weeks, because sperms are produced in the man in the testes every 6 weeks. So it's important to do a report in a good laboratory and to repeat it after 6 weeks to make a diagnosis. I think that's very, very important, because I think half the time, because infertility patients have no knowledge, they're vulnerable and gullible, most of the doctors just take advantage of this and just give them a whole lot of tablets, to increase the motility, to increase. And I'll come to that later, that there are no treatments in the world to do this, unfortunately, other than assisted reproduction. But like I said, like you asked me the causes. So usually it's idiopathic, which means there are no causes, unfortunately. It could be just genetic. But yes, there are a few causes. For example, infections, especially sexually transmitted diseases like gonorrhea, HIV would cause infertility. Sometimes there are chromosomal problems, genetic problems like Kleiner filters, which is a well-known problem, such as XXY. Sometimes there are tumors, sometimes there's hormonal imbalance. In the past, it used to be undescended testes. A simple infection like mumps causes severe damage to the testes called orchitis, inflammation, and then leads to testicular failure, where the man almost has no sperms. But today, as progress is being made, you're treating infections, so these causes are less. But yes, today, sperm counts are going down. And one of the reasons is environmental, which means the use of plastics, the use of pesticides, all these things are adding up and bringing down the sperm count. So yes, there are, even tight underwear is known, because the scrotum gets very heated up, and because testes produces sperms all the time. I think it's important for people to know not to wear tight jeans, not to wear tight underwear, not to keep your laptops on your lap the whole day and sit, because unknowingly, things are changing. So we need to find out. Now, it's a common myth that stress causes infertility, but no, stress does not cause infertility. It's the other way around. Infertility causes stress. So
That's true.
yeah.
Well said.
Lifestyle, I think I should mention that heavy smoking, which means about 10-20 cigarettes a day, does cause the motility specifically of the sperms to go down. And the good news is that it's irreversible. So when I ask a history, and typically the man will say, no, I don't smoke. Then they look at each other, then they commit, yes. You tell them, okay, stop smoking for 3 months, and the motility goes up. So that's a good thing. Drugs such as marijuana, cocaine also cause infertility, low sperm count. Obesity causes sexual dysfunction, hormonal imbalance. Severe alcoholism does not cause a low sperm count or motility, but again, it can affect your sexual activities. So yes, alcohol and tobacco does make a difference. And this is including shisha. Guys, please note, it's not just smoking, cigarettes. People say, oh, it's okay to take shisha, but shisha is probably worse than cigarettes at times.
Thank you for that warning. And I'm glad we talked about this. I'm going to take a break and come back and continue this conversation with Dr. Malpani, but after a quick break. So stay with us. Hello and welcome back to a cover story conversation. We have with us Dr. Anjali Malpani, who's just out with a book on infertility called Tears, Sighs and Lullabies, the Untold Stories of Infertility. She's got her own clinic also, and she's been telling us about various case studies, but more important that the various reasons that could lead to infertility, a low sperm count in men. Now let's talk about the women. We were talking about the men before the break. What about the low, women where the ovaries, sometimes there's some women born without a womb, or they're infertile. How do you deal with that? What are the causes for that, first of all? Any causes apart from genetic?
Yes. So in the women, in fact, we can divide the causes as ovarian, uterine causes, and tubal causes, and others. So in the commonest problem is the ovarian dysfunction, which means it's an anovulation. That means you do not produce an egg every month, or sometimes it's just a hormonal imbalance, which is typically seen in what everybody knows as polycystic ovaries or PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now, let me tell you, Priya, that practically every other girl today, not even a woman, a young adolescent girl, is being diagnosed as a PCOS. And do you know why? Because at 10 and 11, they start getting a little bit of acne. So they are very, very particular. They tell them, Mom, oh, I have to, a little bit of hair on their arms, legs, underarms. So they go to the parlors. Then they go to the customer. They tell their mothers. The mothers are hyper because you want to wear shorts, or you want to wear good dresses. You want to look good at the age of 10 and 11. Then they take into a cosmetologist, or not a dermatologist, typical cosmetologist, who tells them to do an ultrasound, and bang, there you see a few follicles, you're diagnosed as PCO. And it's so sad because lifelong these people are labeled as PCOS, So I think it's not important, PCOS, as long as you're menstruating regularly. PCOS doesn't harm you. You can worry about it when you grow older and you want a child. All PCOS are not infertile. That's another common myth, that if you're a PCOS, oh, you're going to be infertile. No. Everybody does not require treatment. There are some PCOS who are, and there are treatments, like a simple tablet. Sometimes they can get pregnant, sometimes just losing weight. I think, they get pregnant. But that's another story I don't want to get, because, then you not only involve a cosmetologist, you're involving a dietitian, you're involving a gym, parents are forcing kids to go. So that's really sad. So that's one part of it. So there are ovulation disorders, which are the commonest. 40% of women have this. They're easy to treat. The second is a tubal factor, where the tubes get blocked. Now, in the past, we used to see tubes getting blocked because of infections, specifically infections like tuberculosis. But today with treatment, I've hardly seen any patients with tubal blocks with tuberculosis. Sometimes you would get infections in the past, like gonorrhea, chlamydia, causing infections, severe infections where the tubes and ovaries all form a mass called a TO mass, or we call it as the pelvic inflammatory disease, which is not seen anymore. Then there's endometriosis, which is quite common. Endometriosis means the blood which comes down into your menstrual cycle, which comes out of the body, sometimes reverses, goes back to the tubes and gets deposited at the back of your uterus. And we don't know why, but endometriosis can cause infertility in some patients. In some patients, they form big, blood chocolate cysts in the ovaries. And even those people can get pregnant. But sometimes there are a few spots and they don't get pregnant. So it's called an enigmatic disease. It's always, we're always wondering why, what is happening inside. And the third problem is a uterine problem, where some people have things like polyps, fibroids inside the uterus, which can affect fertility. Again, I would like to note, this is very, very important. Almost 4 out of 10 people will have fibroids, which are inside the muscle of the uterus, which are known as intramural fibroids, are outside the uterus. They do not cause infertility. So just because you see a fibroid, now typically what happens, you don't get pregnant, you do an ultrasound, and bang, the gynecologist says, wow, there's a fibroid, does a laparoscopy, charges your bomb, removes it. But it's irrelevant. You do not have to remove fibroids, which are not inside the endometrium or the lining of the uterus. Only those cause problems. I think that's a very important thing.
Thank you for that. That's an important piece of information. Now I want to ask you is what can you explain the procedure of IVF? And is it very exorbitant, or is it accessible to people, salaried people, normal people also?
Okay, there are two questions. Yes, I'll tell you the procedure. It's a very simple procedure. See, we started IVF way back. We were the first clinic, a private clinic in India. We started in 1990. This is 2023. And as you must have noticed, in every gully, every lane today, you're seeing fertility clinic. Everybody wants to do IVF because they think it's a lucrative, you can earn money, you don't have emergencies, but that's not true. You need a laboratory, you need a good setup to get success. Anybody can do IVF today. It's very, there are protocols now in place. You get the medium, which was not available in the past for the laboratory. We had to import medium, we had to make medium. But today, everything is ready. Today, we have Mr. Google, we have, your mobile phone. With a click of a button, you just order and everything comes to your place. So doing IVF has been fairly simple, but success. Until you get success, you're not a good doctor, And like I said, infertility patients are very vulnerable and they can get cheated very often. So you have to be very careful. So what do we do in IVF is, first of all, let me tell you, IVF is not meant for everybody. IVF, there are certain reasons you do IVF. One is if your tubes are blocked, which was a common problem in the past. Today, we don't see that many blocked tubes. If you have severe endometriosis, if the woman's age now is going up, that's another I think topic we can discuss later on, as how women are getting married later. So that's become a social infertility today, where we need to do IVF at the age of 37, 38, 40, 45. Whatever you say, people want a baby at that age. And obviously, it's harder to get.
I want to just cut you on this point. This is a very important point, which I faced in a lot of my shows also, because patterns are changing. Women want career first, babies later. So can they freeze their eggs and have the baby later?
Absolutely.
And there's no impact on the child. Can it be the child will have complications if they're born later?
That's a very important topic, and that's exactly what's happening today. People are postponing their childbearing, even if they're married. And a lot of women are not getting married because they can't find Mr. Right, or they want to pursue their careers, or they want to pursue their studies. So yes, egg freezing is a very, very viable option. In fact, I believe in technology, because if there is, today biology is not destiny. In the past, we women said, oh my God, what do I do? My age is gone, let's have a baby. But today we can have our cake and eat it too. So today you can pursue your careers, you can freeze your eggs. It's a very safe procedure. In the past, we were not able to freeze, we were able to freeze eggs, but when we thawed them, that means when we took them out for treatment, the eggs would not survive. But today, so out of 10 eggs we froze, for example, 1 or 2 would survive. But today in my clinic, at least 10 out of 10, all 10 are getting survived. So and these eggs do not get damaged. They do not cause abnormal babies. You can keep the eggs as long as you want, 10 years, 15 years, and then come back and get a baby. Now, another important point I want to say is it's the ovaries which age, or your eggs which age. Peak fertility is around 30 to 30, it's between 20 and 30, okay, in a woman. But obviously, people are not going to come to me at 20s anymore. So the right age is to come before 35. 32, 32, 33 is a good age to freeze your eggs. Please do not wait till you're 37, 38, 39, because the quality of the eggs goes down and the numbers also go down, even if you're doing IVF. I think that's a very important message I would like to tell everybody, that if you do want to freeze your eggs, do it at the age which is less than 35, so you have a better quality and a larger number of eggs to freeze.
That's a good piece of advice, I think, to our people. So every time, just one quick last question to you before we're totally out of time now. What has been your most happy story? Is it for a very older couple got pregnant, or someone who got pregnant after 17 tries? What is the story that brings that smile to your face?
Yes, I've got hundreds and hundreds of patients, and very hard, because that's my ikigai. When I see that smile on every infertile couple, that's what I live for. So it's very hard to say which couple, but yes, I definitely remember this very poor couple which came from Orissa way back in 92, 93. And she was being harassed by her mother-in-law in the villages. She was up to a point of suicide. So her sister goes to her and says, okay, she reads about us in a Oriya magazine. I mean, I couldn't even imagine. It was India Today, which has written the article, translated it into Oriya. And she had a photo of me and she had tucked it in her blouse. And they didn't know Malpani, they didn't know Mumbai. They just sat in a train, came to VT station, and they just said, we want to go to Malpani. Now, this is sheer luck. It happened that they were asking around for Malpani. They meet a taxi driver to get instruction and says, oh, I take a lot of patients to Malpani clinic from VT, Victoria Terminus, Mumbai. So he guides them the bus. They sit in a bus. They come without money. They have no idea what they're doing. And the husband had a problem. Though the woman was tortured, she was tormented, she was actually burnt by her mother-in-law every time she got a period with a hot spoon, and she wanted to commit suicide. So they come and with a very simple treatment, because ours is again the first sperm bank in India where we were, freezing sperms at that point to avoid HIV. But the simple, now this was all luck because I did a sonography on her. She was about to ovulate in 2-3 days. They did not have money. I allowed them to stay in my hospital room. Did a sonography again after, every day. The egg follicle ruptured. We did a donor insemination. They didn't have money to pay because they just come like that. I said, fine, just leave it. You can always pay me later on or send the money or whatever. And well, they go back. And I just waited for the result 14 days later and they just don't get back. And I don't know, because how do you go in the 92, 93, no email, no phone, nothing. And I wait and they just don't come back. And I thought, is she alive? Is she not alive? I should think about her almost every day. And then after 2 years, one day as I was just coming up, from somewhere at the gate, somebody just, kind of just touches my feet. And I'm like, what's happening? I didn't recognize her because this woman had a 2-year-old boy in her hand. She'd cut her hair short, put on makeup. She was wearing a very funky salwar kameez, husband with a check. I yet remember that, and that smile on their face and that confidence that they had. I mean, it was absolutely amazing. She started a parlor. So not only had she improved her own life, her mother-in-law was with her, who was doting on the child. So that family improved. And because she was, in a small village, she started a parlor. So she gave jobs to so many people. So
that's an
so
amazing story. I'm sorry I'm cutting you really short because we're totally out of time, but it's a lovely note to end on. It's a lovely story and keep up the good work. And we enjoyed your books. All the best with that. Thank you so much, Anjali, for this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.